think we would like to.
Okay, thank you so much. My name is Daphne Machida. I'm a working journalist on issues of gender, vis-a-vis climate and politics. I'm an online publisher of East African Inspired 2016. And thank you. Just inspiring.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Brighton Chijande. I'm a public health and health promotion expert. I'm based at the Graduate Medical Center here in Harare. I've got a special interest in public health issues and also climate change issues as well. I'm here also additionally as a presenter on the topic of climate change and health. Thank you.
Afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Zion Mashakwe. I'm a consultant for the National Determined Contributions, which is NDC, Implementation Tracking in Zimbabwe. I work for Green Impact Trust, which is an NGO which promotes climate smart agriculture in Zimbabwe. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Anna Hoffmann-Kwanga. I'm the resident representative of the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung offices in Zimbabwe. We are working on multiple strands of climate change programming, one of them being this meeting on media engagement with climate change, but also beyond that, happily working with the ministry and other partners in the country around this topic. Thank you.
Okay, I think we are ready now. The first question is coming from Kudakwashi Pembere. My name is Kudakwashi Pembere with Envirozim. My question is on health and climate. Does Zimbabwe have ways to measure their production?
Okay, thank you so much for the question. Currently, as it stands, I really doubt that they are really documented studies which have actually been done here in the country concerning the measurement of the effects of air pollution. But then I would need probably clarification from those actually in government in the Department of Climate Change and also those who are actually in the Ministry of Health as well. But then current evidence actually points towards the concern with these public health concerns in issues to do with air pollution and also climate change. But I wouldn't readily say there is a source that I have that points towards the measurements of how those emissions are actually affecting us in the country. Thank you.
Okay, the next question reads, I would like to understand the role of media as a key stakeholder in NDCs.
The question was
I think maybe the second question was coming from Prof. Martin, isn't it?
Yeah, it's no. That is the question. I was saying, let me say it from here. I was saying that what the government is doing, or probably the Department of Climate Change is doing to persuade or to alliance with the institutions of higher learning to introduce courses that are journalism related to help students to grill issues of climate change at a lower stage before they become fully fledged practitioners.
So maybe I can answer that one. In terms of inclusion of climate change in the curriculum, the first stage that we did actually was to make sure that this climate change features in the curriculum, that primary and secondary education curriculum, competence-based curriculum, and now climate change is featured in that one. And also under the UNCC Learn project that we did from 2019 up to 2020, we developed a national climate change learning strategy. And one of the bright actions was to to sort of teacher training to make sure that we include climate change issues in teacher training. So at least when a teacher comes out of a college, he knows what climate change is and is able to deliver that competence-based curriculum that features climate change. And also we are working with universities, trying to make sure that at least they have master's programs on climate change. For instance, Victoria University now has a master's in climate change and sustainable development. Mufana University, almost all universities have climate-related programs. That's what we are working together. Even under the National Adaptation Planning Project, we are working with universities and tertiary institutions, trying to make sure that we mainstream climate change in educational programs. Otherwise, we are on course. That's how I can answer. I mean, maybe my colleagues would like to add, Mr. Mwati or Mr. Mashuno.
I just wanted to give an example. In the UK, there are some universities that are offering climate change communication studies or climate change journalism, which is specific to communication, not a program that is specific to climate change science, because that is where the problem is coming. We need to simplify climate change science into an easier communication aspect, so that journalists understand how to communicate, and also communities understand how to interpret. That's my word.
Okay.
And that's a very valid one. It's a very valid one, but as you might understand, our institutions, especially the universities, they are centers of free thinking, and they are also, in that respect, in terms of coming up with their own courses and everything, they are given as much liberty as possible for them to come up with design courses for approval by the Higher Education Council. So each sector looks at its needs and approaches universities and pitches up their ideas with them that we need this program. So for us, for climate change, we will find that for the climate change community, we will look at the central issue of climate change. So we are looking at a BSc in meteorology and climate change. We are looking at an MSc in climate change, agriculture, and stuff like that. But for other specialized areas, it's also up to you, colleagues, within the media fraternity, the journalism fraternity, to actually also approach different universities with your ideas. That this is what we need. Don't you think this is a good course to actually take up? And you might have students, we need this. Because they also look at it from a perspective, are we going to have enough students? And are the students also going to get something out of it? It's unfortunate, but that's how they look at it. So you also need to assist us on that part, to also approach them and also give your ideas in terms of climate change and communication. Thank you.
Sorry. Yes.
This other person.
I also think the meeting can also play a part in terms of trying to push for a policy around those factors. So I think we can kind of take something that we are going to in a very
Yes, so I think under the National Adaptation Planning, we are trying to mainstream climate change in development planning or the development frameworks. So I think education is one of the development, the economic sector that we are going to mainstream climate change in. I'm happy that at least this is coming from you, and this is being live streamed, and people from higher education, from the higher education sector, they are hearing this and they are going to push for the idea. But ourselves, we promise that we are going to also push the idea and try to mainstream climate change in media studies, actually, so that we produce journalists, media practitioners that know what climate change is and are ready to disseminate it to the general public. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mwati. Thank you, Mr. Mtasa. Let's move on to the next question. It is how far have you included particular languages in your material, considering that we have the official languages?
This is the one which works.
Yes, maybe I can just, of course, I cannot speak of the materials of the government, but highlight also, I think, touching on another question that related to the interactions between communities and people working in the field of education on the issue of climate change. One issue and one program that I maybe would like to highlight is a publication and a research we were managing to do last year with being led by Anna Brazier, who went across the country to find local coping mechanisms. The publication is titled Indigenous Knowledge Systems on Climate Change Mitigation and Adaptation. And besides being in its content a very interesting finding, it is also a very interesting approach to answer some of these questions. The results have been translated back into Shona and Lindebele, and the books have been printed and disseminated. But it was one of the aims of the research to not only be extractive and to not have this one-way delivery system in the areas of climate change. Either we bring information or we pick information from somewhere, but to create mechanisms to involve the communities on where they stand, on how it feeds into the big picture of the scientists in the universities, and then to take it back to them, to show them how what they're doing connects, and how maybe learning and sharing between the communities can already be of a lot of benefit vis-a-vis just this top-down learning. We're talking about tertiary institutions a lot, but clearly climate change information needs to reach a much wider audience than the university educated. So that's as an example maybe to the question.
Okay, thank you.
So, yeah. Also maybe to add to that, we are talking of different information materials in different curricula. As a department, under the same project, National Nutrition Planning Project, we develop quite a number of materials in more than 15 languages. They are there, and they are ready for the public benefit from them. So we are doing what we can, we are doing our best to ensure that we are in the right track.
Okay, thank you, thank you. The next question is, most climate change adaptation projects in Zimbabwe are being donor funded. Does the government have any mechanism to support these projects in the event that the donors pull out?
Yes, that's our question. Okay. I think, yeah, in terms of financing.
Just get me a chair or something.
Yeah, of course, I think let me just
Yeah.
That's fine. All right, thank you. In terms of climate financing, yes, we get some resources from the government, but the resources, you know, they are not enough. They are no longer enough. So these donor funds from the GCFs, the JEFs, and all those things, all those climate finance mechanisms, they are to complement the resources that we have as a nation. But yes, we get funds from the government, but the funds, they are no longer enough. That's why we end up looking for funds somewhere else from this financial mechanism, so that we complement what we have and try to implement projects that will benefit the whole nation. Thank you. Maybe others might want to add something.
Maybe my colleagues from government, Mashungu, might add, might not add something if anything.
The panel will end up having 10 people. Yes, I think in terms of donor funding, there is what we call donor funding, like from actual donors. And then there's also funding that comes into the multilateral fund. The multilateral fund, such as the Green Climate Fund, is not a donor agent. It's a multilateral fund created by all the countries that are part of the United Nations Convention on Climate Change. And it's a multilateral fund that is going to be there for the foreseeable future, just like the Global Economic Facility. for example, is a United Nations funding mechanism. So those ones are going to be applying for resources from those and getting resources from there for the foreseeable future. Okay, so that's those resources are not expected to go anywhere. As long as Zimbabwe, we are party to the UNFCCC and also party to the Paris Agreement, we are going to be continuously accessing those particular resources. And then there are other bilateral resources. Those ones, yes, we can put them into the category of donor funds. And those particular resources, again, as long as our relations are good, we expect those to continue coming. But as a government, we are also taking a lead by developing or coming up with our own national climate change fund. I think all of us, we know that there's something called carbon tax. Each time we buy a bit of petrol or diesel, a few cents are taken from that, from whatever you pay, and it's called carbon tax, part of the tax that you pay. And it runs into millions of dollars every year. So we want now the Ministry of Finance to direct those resources towards the National Climate Change Fund, and then we'll use the resources to actually implement our programs and projects as a country. The rationale here is that when you are driving your car, you are polluting the atmosphere. When you are burning your diesel and petrol, and so you should pay and also assist those who have been affected by climate change to adapt to climate change. So we want those resources to go where they're supposed to go, to those who are affected by climate change and to mitigate against climate change. That's our plan. But for that to happen, we need an actual parliament. And very soon we'll be coming with a draft law for debate and discussion. It will include the National Climate Fund as one of those issues, major issues under that National Climate Change Bill. Thank you very much.
Moving on to the next question. Do we have a disaster management fund, and how much is it in its coffers?
What? Disaster management fund.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yes, there is a disaster management fund. If you look at the Civil Protection Act of 1989, within that there is something called the disaster management fund. And then also under the draft bill, the disaster management bill, emergency preparedness and disaster management bill, there is also a disaster management fund that is proposed within that. In terms of what it is and the amount of money that are in there, well, that is a question that can be answered by our colleagues from the Ministry of Local Government, where our disaster management authority, in the form of the Civil Protection Department, that's where they sit. So those are the ones who are privy to what they have, resources of funding, and what they are using it for. But there is a disaster management.
Okay, thank you. What would you do to strengthen our public health system to address the challenges of climate change?
Okay, thank you so much for that question. Yeah, the strategy that we need to use in terms of our public health system in dealing with these issues of climate change is to work at it at the mitigation level and also at the adaptation level with the context, within the context of the public health sector. Then we need it to work around it also according to the ecological health model at the intrapersonal level, at the interpersonal level, at the societal level, prior to that at the organization level, and then also at the national or policy environment where we also interact with the external countries. In terms of mitigation, there is the concept of non-motorized travel, which is not very popular here in this part of the world, especially here in Africa. We need to have a culture of using non-motorized travel so that we reduce carbon emissions into the atmosphere. We need there are distances where we can actually use walking, cycling as examples, but then we tend to focus more on the use of motorized travel. So we need a high advocacy campaign which involve the media and all other stakeholders at community level and also at national level, where we drive the need to adopt the use of non-motorized travel, to adopt other measures which help us in mitigation. And then we also need a good disaster preparedness plan, where we say, yes, the public health sector, we only realize the interlink or the interdependence between the public health sector and departments which are dealing with climate change when disaster strikes. For example, when we have floods or when we have cyclones, people get injured during those times. People drown, they need medical attention, there are disruption of medical supplies, there is limited access to medical facilities during those times. So, in light of this, as a measure, as an adaptation measure, we need to have emergency medical preparedness. We need to look at ways to deal with the supply of medicines when disaster strikes. We need to have an interdependence and a collaboration between the ministries of lands, agriculture, climate change, and also the ministries of health, and also the ministries which deal with the infrastructural development. Because for us to use non-motorized travel, for us to have cycling being used for people to cycle to work, they would need dedicated cycling routes, which we need to put into consideration when we construct our roads, that there will be people who will be cycling to work. Then in terms of the advocacy as well, where the media comes in, and where the politicians, where the leaders come in. If we have got, say, 10 members of parliament today who are going to cycle to parliament from home, and then the media comes in, captures that, motivates people, it is going to motivate a lot of people even at college level, where people wear culture of, we can also cycle, we can also walk some distances. Because as long as there's so much pressure on the use of motorized travel, we'll continue to have these challenges coming. There are also a lot of other domains, but I guess when I present the topic on climate change and health, I also deal with some of these cases as well. Thank you.
Okay, Doctor, thank you. Unless if there is someone who have any question or maybe a contribution from the panelists as well. Okay, Wamombe.
I think I wasn't answered with regard to my question which I asked earlier, is to the role of media in the NDC, and if the media was actually identified as a key stakeholder, if these guys were also included in the NDC consultation processes and the likes. I think that was my question initially.
Okay,
No problem. Yeah, then also it. Everyone was involved in the enhancement of the NDC, the enhancement of the NDC. Everyone, even the media, the youths, everyone was involved in the enhancement of the NDC. Even if you take a look at our NDC communication strategy, media has a very, very important role to play in terms of disseminating the mitigation measures that are mentioned in the advised NDC or even the lens. Or even the lens. We have a role to play. That's why we are here, that's why we organize this workshop. So at least we are on the same level and we move together. It will help us in trying to disseminate the best practices, the mitigation measures that are mentioned in the LEDs and in the NDC. So we have to play. Check the NDC communication strategy. There are clear roles there. So maybe Ms. Inamasha, who's also working on the NGC tracking tool, that's why we engaged in to be part of this engagement. So maybe you can provide more details, more insights on the idea.
Thank you, Mr. Tas. Maybe the issue on the role of media when it comes to NDC implementation tracking, we are now talking of tracking how these targets are being implemented. And earlier on, Mashungu presented on the IPCC sectors, the IPPU, waste, energy, and affordable. And they all have mitigation targets, which add up to the 40%. So now we want to draw down and see to what extent are the mechanisms on how to implement to achieve these targets per sector. Then media comes in now to do, if it's investigative journalism, the methodologies that you use when you are looking for information, because it's not just about disseminating this information, but also being able to analyze and package, like I think what the gentleman was talking about, and then be able to now deliver it to different stakeholders. We have youth, we have women, we have people in rural areas in different languages. So I think that's key.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Maybe you have the same question again.
Yeah, just a follow-up to what he just said, to his sentiments. In terms of tracking, climate change tracking, I think we are now looking at how best can we strike a balance on the existing gaps between the major players in the climate change, the real stakeholders, and the media guys, the media fraternity itself. I would like to admit to the fact that all along our camp has not been, things have not been well, we've been lagging behind in terms of technical aspects. So what can we do in terms of ensuring sustainability in terms of reporting? All along, it's all about event reporting. We just come, we collect remarks, we go back home. But I'm just a bit worried in terms of ensuring sustainability in terms of reporting.
Very good question. I'm not able to answer it 100% because there are a lot of things around that. And I think even from Mr. Mashungu, he can also add maybe offline. I'll give an example of maybe the waste sector, where you have different local authorities. You also want to find out to what extent the preparedness of local authorities and the awareness of local authorities around the targets that have been set in the sector as stakeholders, and to what extent they are moving towards that, because eventually it's the country's ambition towards reducing emissions by 2030. Then you find that when you are tracking, there are technologies involved, there are procedures, there are decisions which should be made, stakeholder meetings to maybe develop systems and programs and projects around that. And where there are gaps, they need to be flagged out, and to what extent they are being maybe addressed. Media's role is in that aspect because it's a process. So being involved in those stakeholder meetings, in those events, is very important as well. And also analyzing to what extent there is commonality amongst the local authorities to address the issue of waste. And I think it's more to do with solid waste as well, liquid waste, Then you also look at the landfills and dump sites. You look at the separation of waste. To what extent are local authorities doing the same things so that we are able to reach the target in reducing emissions? So media's role is very critical to bring to light all these processes that are happening. This is one sector. And then when you go to energy or IPPU, like what Mashungu said about cement industry, you look at those issues as well. To what extent are they reducing emissions in their operations? So there's a very big space for media to participate, and we can continue to engage. Thank you.
Okay, I think maybe last but not least, the api matano ari kutorwa mukudzidzisa vagari vematunhu akasarira maringe nezvekushanduka kwemamiriro ekunze uye matanho avangatore mukuderedza dambudziko iri. Okay, let's hear from our panelists. Okay, regai tidzokore zvakare mibvunzo. Handi ndeapi matanho ari kutorwa mukudzidzisa vagari vematunhu akasarira maringe nezvekushanduka kwemamiriro ekunze uye matanho avangatore mukuderedza dambudziko iri?
Rules of the community.
Okay, thank you. Zvingaitwa munyaya iyi tine agroecological zone map yemuZimbabwe itsva yakabuda nofunga gore rapera ichitaura nezvemamiriro ekunze. Taimbova nema-agroecological zones aisvika 5 mashanu. Mumashanu iwayo pane region 5 yakazodamburwa kuita mairi nokuti zvakaonekwa kuti mvura yashomane kune imwe region yakunzi 5B kwane mvura shomane yakunaya 5A zvimwe chetezvo. So information yakadaro yakakosha kuti vanhu vazive, nokuti vanogona kunge vachifungira kuti zvichiri zvazviri pakunaya kwemvura, votenga mbeu dzavo vogadzira zvavanogadzira, asi vozoona kuti kwete, kunze kwashanduka. Zvinoda kuti information yakadaro irambe ichiudzwa vanhu. Ndotenda kuti ku-Climate Change Management Department vane magwara akawanda avari kushandisa. Kune ma-communication strategies aripo okutaurira vanhu vari munharaunda kuti zvii zvatingaita matiri, nokuti kana kwane agroecological zone map mibvunzo inobuda yakawanda kuti saka isu torimei, saka kwedu kunoitwei. Ndopanouya ma-ministries ose pabachitaurwa nyaya ye-climate smart agriculture manual. Ndo zvimwezve zviri kuuya kuda kubatsira, zvichibatirana nema-communication strategy anga achitaurwa. Ndo panouya media kuti ngaive ichiziva magwara aripo iwayo, mitemo iripo iyo yakakosha kuti tose tirambe tiri muchirungu climate resilient, tive tiri vanhu vakuziva zviriko nezvichaitika kumberi uko, tive takarinda takagadzira.
It's okay. Thank you very much. Kuti ugadzire rwendo unofana kupuwa nguva kuti uve nekuziva ukwanise kuita chinhu, unofana kunge une ruzivo pamusoro pechinhu ichocho. Saka isu sebazi rehurumende reclimate change management department tine zvirongwa zvizhinji kwazvo zvatiri kuita kuti tifundise vanhu kuti tariraizve kunze kwashanduka mamiro ako, ngatifambei takadai. Zvivakwa zvedu ngatishandise mabuilding codes kuti zvisimbe, nekuti tarirai muone zvakaitika kuchimani zvivakwa zvizhinji zvakaderedzwa zvakapaswa zvakapata, mabhiriji yose akapaswa, zvakawanda zvakapata, nemhaka yekuti dzimwe dzenguva pakanga pasingashandiswi mabuilding codes. Taiti aiwa tishingashandise mabuilding codes pane zvatinorima. Ngatisangoramba ichingoti chibage nchingoda mabagwe. Chitauka mbeu dzeshanga doko, small grains. Idzo dzinoita kunyange padzikawana mvura shoma, dzinokura panotoguta. Totowana sadza remapunde rotonaka itimes dzimwe dzenguva kuzodarika kujena. Idzi dziso yatikupa vanhu. Sasa zvarehwa tine magwaro mazhinji akawanda ari mururimi rwamai mundimi dzinodarika 15 dzandakutauridzira, anokurudzira kuti vanhu vorarama sei, voita sei, zvingava zvivakwa, dzingava dzimba, masettlements, kuti vanhu musavakira dzimba mumatoro, nekuti ukaisa chivakwa mudoro mvura ikawandisa chotorwa nemvura achina kusimba. Idzi dziso yatikupa vanhu, tikuvapa upakwa hwehwendo nekuti kufamba rwendo. Saka ndosaka tiri kuti takukurudzira mapractices akasiyana-siyana ari sector specific. Somuenzaniso muzvivakwa taura nemabuilding codes. Vekanzura vapengi kana vachiita kumba kwako vachiinspector uchivaka, they know kuti pakazoita disaster kana tachiinspector chivakwa chako tachiapprova chinge chakasimba choramba chakadira, zvivakwa tapedza mabuilding codes. Kuagriculture tataura zvakare nyaya yekurimwa kwembeu dzeshanga doko, small grains, nekusangovimba kusarilaya neagriculture chete. Wadi kumboitawo zvemikando, wadi kumboitawo zvemaclubs. Those are some of the things. Those zvimwe zvatiri kukurudzira vanhu kuti vaite nekuti kunze kwashanduka. Unonga munoona kuti even ndiko all over pasi rose zviri kunzi ngatishandisei mota dzamagetsi. Dziri kunzi dzedhiziri nepetrol dzokurisa chose chakashata chiri kucontributa zvakare mukushanduka kwamamiro ekunze. Ngatishandisei mota dzemagetsi. Saizvozvo togadzira framework yacho kuti tichazvifambisa sei senyika, kuti pazichazoya dzakati one day mota dzemagetsi zvichenge tichiita sei. Tinawo here maservice station acho. Ndozvezvimwe zviri kuitirwa izvo. Ndinonga makaona veenergy vanashingi vaivapo vakatotaura neveministry of energy. Energy vakatumisa maservice stations akasiyana-siyana ekuti mota idzo dzemagetsi kana dzauya sikuziva kuti at least tinge tabatsirika. So zvakawanda zvinokwanisa kuitiwa zviri sector specific, but chikuru ruzivo, kuva neruzivo. That's why muripo, that's why you are there, that's why you can write, that's why you are here. We organize this workshop so that you need to write articles anonzwisiwa nevanhu, iri clear kumunhu, not kuti munotaurwa mavhoko mamwe asingahwisisiki kwete. Zviri nyore vekwaedza vonyora zvavanonyora vana Philipa vese vane venhau wavo and everyone monyora zvinozwisisiwa navanhu, zviri clear to the point. Zvakawanda zvatofana kuita, saka ngatiteererei vana chiremba kana vachitaura zvatopera.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Mutasa. I'm sure we've come to the end of this session, unless there's someone with a brain question or a contribution. Okay, maybe you can come again.
Actually, I spoke of, I actually asked about the, okay, I asked about the
practitioners having done or going through some processes of research in regards to the industrial processes, testing probably the effect of these produced dangerous gases, the dust also from the industry to the human lives in any certain community or area. For example, we can have the mining areas. We can have areas like Waki, for example. There is this black smoke that is being produced daily. What is the effect, right? How much are these people being affected? Let's talk for example the mining areas. They are using different chemicals, and water at times is being affected. How far is the health practitioners gone in trying to assess from their own perspective or area of profession in finding out how people are being affected with these things? Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for that question. Actually, worldwide is actually documented that these chemicals actually can end up being what are called carcinogens or cancer-causing agents. There are quite a number of cancers which actually are related to chemical use, depending on the susceptibility of that particular person to the type of cancer. I would say in our own setting, there's a lot of research which still needs to be done, but there's a department called NASA, which actually does corporate wellness programs, which actually goes into different companies, and people are done chest x-rays and other investigations to rule out any pathology which could be in their lungs. So I would say at our level, there's a lot of work which is yet to be done. Worldwide, it's well documented that there are some chemicals which can cause cancers, which actually can be traced back to say this person used to work in such an industry and now he has this type of cancer. That person could likely have been predisposed to it because of those carcinogens. So when I will later on present on health and climate change, I will also highlight the different health considerations that are taken in terms of the effects of climate change, the pathologies that are very common in different parts of the world, and also the recommendations on measures which are being given, particularly by the World Health Organization and other organizations in terms of dealing with these challenges.
Okay. Thank you, Doctor. Is there anyone now? Okay, we have one question. Maybe just a quick question.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to ask you, talked about building codes and etc. And when we're talking about buildings and big infrastructure like that, that is done through governments, one. Two, we've seen housing being developed on wetlands and nothing has been done. Instead, we see that demolitions take place, but instead of correcting whatever wrong would have been made, it's like I'm demolishing to put on another structure. So I want to know how far corruption has contributed to the mess that we are in right now in Zimbabwe in trying to reach the goals that you've set up in NDC and LEDS, and what your response as government is in making sure that those issues are dealt with decisively. Thank you.
Okay. So maybe more information. Yes.
Yeah, the government is working on the building codes. That one is on the cards in accordance with the with the Low Emission Development Strategy and the NDC. In terms of corruption, the issues of transparency, what is the government doing? What the government is doing currently is to ensure that the work that you are doing is exposed and is very open. So from the start, when we started doing the NDC, and I'm sure we saw the presentation by the deputy director when he was showing you in terms of the funds. We received so much funds, and all this one. So the first issue that we are doing in terms of transparency is to ensure that we let it out to the journalists like we are doing today, so that you can be able to ask where each and every cent is going. So the government is very transparent, especially in terms of climate change, to our donors, to the journalists, to the public, so that you can interrogate each and every fund that you want to see how it was spent. So basically, that's what the government is doing. And we also have some robust measurement, reporting, and verification system, which are elaborated in our low emission development strategy, which are very open for everyone to see what we are doing and what we are not doing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think
I'm not sure my question was answered, sorry. I was asking in terms of the actual action. Okay, so money that has been made available to the country is known, and you probably have ways of accounting for all of that. But I'm asking in terms of our environment. People are building on wetlands. Demolitions take place, but they are not dealing with the problem. Instead, the structures are destroyed this year. 3 years later, there are some more structures put in place in those areas. Now, what efforts are you making as government to make sure that our wetlands are protected? The areas that are wetlands, the areas that are supposed to be protected in terms of our natural environments, how far is government, or what actions are you really taking in ensuring that whoever is corrupt is actually jailed or punished for what they are doing? Because right now we have cases where the people are asking, munhu akasungwa nhasi oriliswa mangwana, asi nyaya yake hatisi kuona ichisvika pa-logical conclusion. Does the people then develop a sense of faith in the government? Does the people develop a sense of wanting to follow my instructions? And what will make people follow you when you say we were fighting climate change, when they feel like the government is actually not taking measures that fight against climate change?
Yeah, thank you. But I'm sure possibly it might be a person that we are not able to respond at this point, because I think you are not the responsible department. I think we're the anti-corruption department. I think that deals with that one. And here, what we are doing, which we can authoritatively answer, is what we are doing on climate change, the documents that we have produced, what we are doing to support that, to fund those programs, to involve stakeholders. Like in this process, we've brought journalists to tell them what we're doing on climate change, build their capacity. Then remember, government is broad and big, and possibly let's try as much as possible to direct questions which are specific to specific departments. Ours, we're dealing with climate change, and that one, we're very much authoritative on that. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Let's just maybe give a welcome to our panelists.
All right, thank you very much to the panelists. Does any need to do a post-mortem of this? Because I think we're running out of time and we need to go.